Crash Bandicoot, a series that is known for being one of our founding fathers of 3D platforming games in the 90s. With its colorful cast of characters, worlds to explore, and not to mention a few crossovers with another classic 90s platformer. Sadly, it also has its faults, from rushed development on certain games to becoming a victim of Activision's crap, and it looks like their current owners at Microsoft aren't doing much better either. Life fucking sucks. But right, let's try and be more positive when talking about the inner workings of Crash. What is it that a Crash fan like myself love about the series? Well, the obvious answer would be the gameplay, but since I'm trying to do more of a dissected theme discussion for this video thingy, I'll try and talk about other things, like the Bandicoot boy himself. Truly an interesting character, coming out at a time when the 90s was really big into hyperactive zany antics, commercials that were in your face about buying the new products, and quoting popular movies. And sure, Crash has a wacky personality and all, but the developers made the interesting choice where, instead of going with the original plan of having him quote random popular things like all the cool kids were doing at the time, they decided to make him a mute. Well, technically not a complete mute. He might have one or two words to say, like there's the classic "Whoa!" catchphrase. But for the most part, this Bandicoot stays silent. And I think the developers knew that this was the right choice, simply because of how expressive they could make him. Which is quite impressive, because with the exception of cutscenes, in-game character models were just static faces and couldn't show that much articulation for the most part. Just some sprite work on a 3D model with the faces. Crash was a game that really pushed the limits of the PlayStation hardware at the time, showing how a single polygon model can have squash and stretch in both body language and facial expressions. Now at first it's at a minimum for the most part, him just having a confused expression most of the time. Makes sense that he's just been mutated and still processing things, but we still get glimpses of his wacky side, from the main menu when you start the game, to his idle animation, interacting with a Wumpa fruit, showing that he's just a fun-loving guy. And let's not forget about how the Japanese side of the franchise played a big part in Crash's body language. They were the ones who invented the Crash Dance, a combination of wacky poses all at once, a fitting way to show off this manic marsupial. As the series continued on through the PlayStation 1 era, we started to see those movements improve, well, unless you count some spin-off titles. Crash's antics pretty much stayed the same for the most part, a cute mute, as TV Tropes calls it. Wrath of Cortex did feel like a downgrade, as the facial features feel more restricted and not much in the body language. Then again, this was Crash's first time being brought over to a new console, and the development of Wrath of Cortex is a whole other can of worms to get into. Crash Nitro Kart did feel like an improvement, but in some ways it gave us a more mellow side to Crash. Yeah, the Bandicoot acted a lot more casual throughout most of these cutscenes. There are still some standout moments, like the scene where they beat Krunk, the first boss racer. You'd think after beating him, Crash would be making faces to show off his wanty antics, like nah 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 kind of deal. But no, surprisingly, he sees that Krunk is feeling down from losing, and so he gives him his yo-yo to help cheer him up. Something like that is just so simple, yet effective. They don't have to spell it out where everyone has to explain every detail. We get the idea. Seeing Crash giving Krunk his yo-yo is just a simple, "Hey, it's okay, buddy. No hard feelings." Crash Twinsanity is when they really crank up the expressions and body language. In fact, there's some unlockable concept art in the game, where one of them shows Crash's in-game model with different expressions. It's like the developers saw how stiff and toned down the previous games were, so they made this face chart to say, hey, Crash can still work as an expressive mute character. A good example of this is when we get those cutscenes that start off the whole Humiliscate levels. Cortex ponders on what's the fastest way to reach their destination, and we get to see Crash's different expressions and thinking process. We first start off with him, just kinda standing there, but then he suddenly changes his expression like, oh wait, I have an idea. Not sure if it'll work. So, it's like he's pondering the idea. But then we get his next facial expression where he's just like, alright, screw it, I'm gonna do it. Thus kickstarting the levels. A nice progression, starting off casual, to thinking, and then determination. And of course we can't forget about the fact that he's teaming up with Dr. Cortex, who does all the talking. Not sure what the general consensus is with the mute character teaming up with the speaking character, but I think it works for Twinsanity. Aside from the fact that they are heroes and villains forced to work together, we also have some fun clashing of the minds. Crash's naive goodness versus Cortex's ego for villainy. Next up is Crash Tag Team Racing, and we started to see signs of change. The body language definitely comes off very Looney Tunes-esque, with all the dioramas and seeing Crash acting like a dog when he gets excited. I've been a bit mixed about it. It feels like they leaned a little too far in the zany direction, rather than having a steady balance of being zany yet grounded, especially when the humor is a bit more, juvenile. But aside from that, this game is also noticeable for being the first instance where Crash now starts speaking in random gibberish. I guess the developers weren't a fan of the idea of just having the player walk up to an NPC and let them do all the talking. They want Crash to have some kind of reaction, verbally, and not just physically. So that's when they invented the idea of Crash's new language by speaking in random gibberish, and somehow everyone can understand what he's saying. I'm sure Jess Harnell had fun in the recording booth, but I think the character could still work as a mute without it. In fact, we see that in the cutscenes that are clearly made in a different engine. Then again, it's kind of odd seeing a more normal-looking Crash in those cutscenes compared to how wacky the in-game model looks like. And that's not even counting the fact that this is the only game in the Crash franchise where the developers went through the effort of making an in-game model of the Japanese-style look of the character, rather than just having it be exclusive to Japanese covers of the games. Which kind of makes the game stick out like a sore thumb in a way. Yeah, Tag Team Racing is a strange game. So, okay, maybe this was just a one-and-done deal, right? Nope, because later on we got the Titans and Mutants duology, where they solidified the jibber-jabber. I was looking through the cutscenes, and I was quite surprised with how they handled it. At first it starts out with Crash's long gibberish language when reacting to Cortex's latest plans to rescuing Aku Aku. But after the first boss fight in the Mojo Temple, that was it. We never got the scenes of Crash talking in gibberish to interact with a character moments. They're a little more toned down throughout the rest of the game, as he's once again back to reacting with facial expressions and body language. And for the most part, it's alright. I guess it helps that the other bosses take up most of the screen time, like the, fake Tiny Tiger showing up and Crash reacting to his statements, and of course all the scenes with Dr. Engine really chewing up the screen time. As for Mind Over Mutants, the expressions and body language feel less interactive when it comes to in-game models, which probably explains all the different art style and animations that we see in the cutscenes, as a way to make up for it. Almost like they were trying to test the waters for a Crash Bandicoot animated series, which you'd think by now it would have happened already. But still, gotta give props to the animators that no matter what art style they went with, they really know how to make Crash expressive with his reactions. Even a little bit of body language, like in the South Park parody style. The only exception is the opening cutscene where all the characters are puppets. Yeah, Jim Henson Productions, it sure ain't. I might not be the biggest fan of this era of Crash, but over time I have softened up to these games for the most part. It does have their good points. Well, maybe not so much for Mind Over Mutants. That game has way too much backtracking going on. And now we come to the end with the Revival era, where we got some remasters of classic games and a few new titles. You can tell that the animators for this stuff understood what made Crash tick. He's naive, but not completely stupid. He's like Goofy or Derpy Hooves or any of those other well-meaning goofball characters. The jibber-jabber is kept to a minimum here, just a simple ooh or huh when reacting to stuff, which I feel like that's the best way to handle Crash if you have to give him some kind of a voice, as opposed to the previous games where the jibber-jabber went on a little too long. Just simple quick reactions works better for Crash. Crash 4 is definitely one of my favorite portrayals of the character during the Revival era. He's just a lovable goofball with his interactions. Like the scene when he brings in Cortex for a hug when they decide to join forces to defeat Entropy. Aww, even after all the times Cortex tries to destroy him, he does care for his creator in some way. And then there's all the interactions that he has with his sister, which is kind of interesting that throughout a majority of the series, we never really got any brother and sister dynamics. I guess we did get a little bit of that in the Titans and Mutants era, but that was kind of played more for laughs rather than just, oh yeah, they're siblings that do really care for each other, kind of deal. I always did consider Crash and Coco as one of my favorite video game siblings, and Crash 4 is definitely a good example of that. Like when they're saved by Alt-Tana, only to see her leave. They're so happy to be reunited with her, or at least an alternate universe version of her. And she's gone again, not giving them enough time to catch up on things. And then Crash does this, when he gently puts his hand on her shoulder to comfort her. It's little details like that that really make him stand out. They didn't have to have Aku Aku show up and explain everything and all that. Just a simple hand gesture to comfort his sister. Showing that despite being the goofy older brother, he does have a heart and soul when caring for those close to him. And that's all I can think about when trying to make a Crash Bandicoot dissected video thing. So yeah, Crash might not be the most chatty character, but in some ways it does help him feel timeless. There could be an argument that he's still trying to adjust to more modern stuff, like him interacting with a cell phone in Crash 4, but even so, that kind of stuff is kept more to a minimum. And I feel like the best way to handle Crash's character is that he's basically just a goofy older brother, naive but well-meaning, and not completely stupid. I know there's a few things I left out, like some details of the handheld games or his guest appearance on Skylanders, but since there's a strict time limit to this video, I'm just gonna have to end it there. So bottom line, Crash Bandicoot is a good example of when creating a character, sometimes silence is golden.